I got home from work earlier than usual that Thursday. One of the contractors bailed on a call and gave us all back a couple of hours we weren't expecting. I didn't tell Riley I was coming home early. I figured it'd be a nice surprise. Maybe I'd catch her before she started dinner, or we could sit out on the back deck and pretend, just for an hour or two, that we were still the couple who made time for sunsets and slow wine. When I stepped through the door, the house was silent. Not unusually quiet, just still. The kind of stillness that made your skin prickle like the air had been holding its breath. And then I saw them. The flowers. A bouquet of lilies in a tall, frosted glass vase. Center of the kitchen table, right where we used to leave little love notes years ago. Riley adored lilies. She once told me they reminded her of her grandmother, something about grace and dignity, or maybe it was mourning. I can't remember now. But I do know one thing, I didn't buy those lilies. And they weren't from me. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at them like the arrangement might confess something. They were too fresh. The petals were still slightly curled at the edges, damp from the florist's mist. Someone had picked them out on purpose, someone who knew exactly what she liked. For a moment, I even checked my phone, half expecting a surprise, babe, message, or a photo of her holding them up, joking about some neighbor's misdelivery. Nothing. Just 3 unread emails from work and a group chat about the fantasy football league. I walked over, leaned in, and caught the scent. Stronger than I expected, sweet, rich, and a little too personal. Not the kind of thing you forget about and leave out by accident. That's when the unease started creeping in. I carried my work bag to her bedroom, pushing open the door slowly like I expected something or someone on the other side. No one was there, but the cologne hit me almost instantly. Sharp. Musky. Woodsy. Definitely not mine. I hadn't worn cologne since college, and Riley always said she liked me better natural. But this scent didn't belong in our bedroom. It wasn't overpowering, but it lingered. Like someone had stood there for a while. Long enough to leave a trace. I glanced around the room. Nothing looked out of place. Bed still made. No clothes on the floor. Everything looked normal. But the more normal it looked, the more it felt wrong. I opened the closet. Everything hanging neatly in place. Her heels lined up along the bottom as always. Only now I was noticing a new pair tucked near the edge, black stilettos with gold buckles. Riley wasn't the stiletto type. She liked comfort. These were for show, not practicality. And they definitely weren't there last week. I told myself to breathe, that I was overreacting. That sometimes people bring home things they didn't mean to. Maybe a friend stopped by. Maybe someone sprayed too much cologne and she hugged them goodbye. Maybe the shoes were just retail therapy. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Then I walked into the bathroom. The sink was damp. Not dripping, but the porcelain was fogged and glistening like it had just been used. There was a towel in the hamper that hadn't been there that morning. And then I saw it right beside the soap dispenser. A bracelet. Men's. Leather band. Stainless steel clasp. Simple but expensive looking. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand, checking for initials, a logo, anything. Nothing. Just clean, black leather, still warm. I don't wear jewelry. Never have. And Riley's never had male friends who did either, or at least none that I'd seen. And even if she did, why would it be here? My stomach twisted and I had to sit down. I perched on the edge of the tub, the bracelet still clutched in my hand, staring at the floor tiles like they were going to rearrange themselves into an answer. I stayed like that for a long time. Long enough for the sun to dip below the horizon and cast orange shadows through the hallway. I didn't move until my phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Just a reminder about some recurring meeting I'd already decided to skip. I walked back into the kitchen, set the bracelet down next to the lilies, and started making dinner. I didn't even know why. Habit, maybe? Muscle memory. Or maybe I was trying to pretend that nothing was wrong, that we were just a little out of sync. Couples go through that, right? I boiled water, chopped garlic, lit a candle. I even pulled out the good plates, the ones we'd gotten for our wedding but almost never used. I wanted tonight to matter. But it didn't. Not in the way I hoped. Riley didn't come home until nearly 10. I heard the door click, then the familiar sound of her keys hitting the entryway bowl. I didn't say anything at first. I just waited, standing in the hallway like a statue, my heart thudding. When she walked in, she looked different. Hair pinned up like she'd been out for something formal. New makeup. And those heels, the stilettos I'd seen in the closet, clicked across the hardwood with a sound that didn't belong in this house. She saw me and hesitated like she hadn't expected me to be standing there. "Oh," she said, smoothing down her dress. "You're home early." "Yeah. Thought I'd surprise you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I'm surprised." She walked past me and into the kitchen, saw the dinner on the table, the candle still flickering in the center. "You cooked? Figured we could use a quiet night." "I already ate," she said quickly without looking at me. She opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter like she didn't notice the lilies. Like she didn't see the bracelet lying right next to them. "Out with coworkers?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She nodded. "Yeah, we had a happy hour thing. Then a couple of us stayed for drinks." I waited for her to elaborate, to offer names or details or even ask how my day had gone. She didn't. She just took a sip of water and stared at the far wall. "Those new shoes?" I asked, not because I didn't already know, but because I wanted to hear her lie. She glanced down and gave a quick shrug. "Picked them up last week." "They're nice," I said, though I hated the way they looked on her. Like they belonged to someone else. Someone I didn't know. After that, she didn't say much. She yawned loudly and deliberately, then mumbled something about needing to check emails before bed. I watched her carry her water down the hall, not toward our room, but to the guest room, the one we never used unless family visited. She shut the door quietly behind her. And that was it. Dinner stayed untouched on the table. The candle flickered until it burned itself out. The bracelet still sat near the lilies, catching the dim light like a cruel joke. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the flowers, at the plate I'd set for her, at the empty chair across from me. The silence around me wasn't just silence, it was the sound of something unraveling. A thread pulling loose, a foundation cracking. I didn't have proof yet. But I had all the pieces. And for the first time I was afraid to put them together. I didn't confront her the next morning. I don't know if it was fear or pride that held me back. Maybe both. I remember just sitting at the table, nursing cold coffee and pretending to scroll through my phone while she moved around the kitchen like nothing had happened. No mention of the untouched dinner. No glance toward the bracelet still sitting by the sink. Just poured herself a smoothie, kissed me on the cheek like we weren't strangers, and left. It was the kiss that threw me. A mechanical, absent-minded habit. Like she didn't even notice she was doing it. That tiny, casual gesture gutted me more than if she'd ignored me completely. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It hummed with something ugly. I started noticing things after that. Not new things, just things I had ignored before. The changes that seemed small, isolated, harmless in the moment, but were all part of the same thread. Like her phone. She used to leave it everywhere: kitchen counter, bathroom sink, the couch cushions. Yeah? It was always on her, always face down, always locked. I noticed she started silencing her notifications too, claiming she was trying to be more present and less addicted to screens. That would have been admirable if it didn't coincide with her staying up late, scrolling under the covers, shielding the screen with her hand like a teenager with something to hide. I caught her smiling at it once, really smiling, and when I asked what was so funny, she just said meme and locked the screen before I could see it. She'd never lied like that before. Not openly. Not carelessly. Riley used to be a terrible liar. Now she was becoming efficient. Then there were the late meetings. She'd been promoted last quarter, and her schedule had definitely shifted, but the late nights multiplied. What started as a rare event became routine: Tuesdays and Thursdays at first, then bleeding into weekends. Sometimes she'd come home at 10 p.m., flushed and distracted, always with some throwaway line about a deadline or a strategy session. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But something about the way she said team dinner started sounding like code. She also stopped inviting me to anything. There was a time when I'd come along to her office mixers or charity events, play the charming +1, shake hands, sip wine. But lately her calendar filled with things that didn't have space for me. Too boring, she said once when I asked if I could tag along. Just work people talking shop. She was dressing differently too. A little more bold. Tighter fits, heels instead of flats. Her makeup, which used to be an afterthought, was suddenly magazine cover precise. I tried to compliment her, told her she looked stunning one evening, but she waved me off like I was commenting on the weather. It's just for the office, she said. Client presentation. But I remember thinking, who's the client, Riley? And then there was Seattle. 3-day work trip, middle of February. She came back with a tan. Not a deep one, but definitely a sun-kissed glow. I remember looking at her as she unpacked and saying Seattle must have had a heat wave. She just laughed and said something about reflective windows and walking a lot. But her face tightened when she said it. She didn't unpack right away either. That was new. She used to hate clutter. She once scolded me for leaving my gym bag out for a full 24 hours. Now her suitcase stayed zipped up in the corner of our room for nearly a week. On the 5th day, I opened it while she was at work. I didn't find anything obvious, no second phone, no hidden love notes. But her clothes still smelled like chlorine. Not hotel soap pool chlorine. We were in Seattle in February. Who goes swimming in February? Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I had no real proof. I buried my suspicions like a coward and tried harder. I started cooking more often, left her notes like I used to thinking of you, let's take a weekend trip, miss you. Most of them went ignored. A few were acknowledged with a passing smile or a thanks, babe, while she scrolled on her phone. We stopped being us. Conversations became logistics. Groceries, bills, dentist appointments. Anything deeper turned into tension. If I asked questions where she was, who she was with, why she didn't respond to my texts, she got defensive. Once she accused me of being clingy. Another time she rolled her eyes and muttered, you don't trust me anymore, do you? The truth? I didn't know. I wanted to. But it felt like I was trying to believe in a ghost. Even the dog noticed. Our shepherd mix, Daisy, used to curl up at Riley's feet during movie nights. Now she barely paid her any attention. Kept her distance like she didn't recognize her anymore. I envied that instinct. One night, Riley forgot to switch her phone off silent. I was already half asleep when a message pinged through. She was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, so I glanced at the screen. Just a name, Benjamin, and a message preview that said, still thinking about Saturday. You looked and then the rest cut off. I don't know what came over me, but I didn't open it. Didn't take a photo, didn't forward it to myself. I just stared at it, heart pounding, as if reading the rest would make it real. When she came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep. In the morning, the message was gone. That name stuck in my head like a nail, Benjamin. I ran through everyone I knew in her circle. No one matched. Not family. Not friends. Not coworkers she ever talked about. But I didn't ask. I kept pretending. She started using the guest room more after that. Claimed I snored too loudly. Or that she needed space to think. Or that she was working late and didn't want to disturb me when she came to bed. Some nights I'd hear her pacing in there. Others, she was whispering low enough that I couldn't make out the words but just loud enough to make me feel excluded. I began watching her from a distance. Not like a stalker, not yet. But I tracked patterns. She used to have a rhythm, wake at 7, coffee by 7:15, yoga, shower, leave by 8:20. That changed. Some days she was out the door before sunrise. Others, she lingered until 10. She stopped making coffee altogether. Said she was detoxing. But I found Starbucks receipts in her purse. Venti lattes. Every single day. She was detoxing from me. Not caffeine. The tipping point came one Sunday. We had made loose plans to visit her parents. She backed out that morning, saying she felt sick. Said I should go without her. I almost believed her until I found her running shoes muddy by the back door that evening. She hadn't been sick. She'd gone hiking. Alone, she claimed when I brought it up. But the trail pass I found in her car had 2 entry scans. One for her and one for someone named Ben H. The pieces were there, scattered like glass. Some of them jagged, some of them tiny. Some too sharp to even touch. But they all fit together in a way I hadn't wanted to see. Late nights. New passwords. Quiet withdrawals. Excuses that unraveled under the slightest weight. And a name I didn't recognize threaded through everything. Benjamin. The distance between us wasn't random anymore. It was curated. Designed. Intentional. She wasn't just pulling away. She was preparing to leave. It happened on a Saturday. The kind of Saturday where the air felt too still, like the sky was waiting to deliver bad news. Riley had mentioned something earlier in the week about a team rehearsal for a charity performance, something her company did every year. I remembered her being excited about it last year. This time she said it so offhandedly, like it was just an excuse to be somewhere else. I didn't push her on it. Not out loud. But inside I was already pulling threads. That morning she rushed through breakfast, didn't touch her coffee. Wore black leggings, a zip-up hoodie, hair pulled into a braid that felt too polished for rehearsal. She kissed me on the forehead, then left without a word more. 5 minutes later, I realized she'd left her passport on the hallway table. Odd, I thought. We weren't planning any trips. And yet, there it was. The same passport she'd carried with her every day for the last 2 months, supposedly because of upcoming corporate travel. I stared at it for a full minute, heart pounding. Then I grabbed my keys. I told myself I was just going to bring it to her. That was the official story I rehearsed in my head. But the truth? I needed to know. I didn't go to the office first. I drove to the performance venue she had mentioned before, an art center near the edge of the city. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars and a locked entrance. I waited in the lot for 15 minutes, pretending I might have been early. No sign of her. No rehearsals. No people. Nothing. The next place on my mental list was a small cafe Riley loved, the one we used to visit on lazy Sunday mornings back when our silences were comfortable instead of sharp. Something in me pulled toward it like a string tied to my chest. I took a chance and drove there, telling myself I was chasing ghosts. But I wasn't. I was heading toward something real. I spotted her through the window before I even parked. She was sitting in a booth near the back. One hand curled around a cup, the other resting on the table, fingers interlaced with someone else's. A man sat across from her, leaning forward like they were sharing a secret. His hair was dark, a little messy, and he wore thick glasses I recognized immediately. Because I'd seen those glasses before. 2 months ago, I found them wedged between the passenger seat and center console of her car. She told me they belonged to a coworker, someone who had carpooled once and left them behind. I'd asked if I should return them and she'd shrugged it off, said the guy had a spare pair and didn't need them. Now I was looking at that same guy, wearing those same glasses and holding my wife's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't storm inside. I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching like I was outside my own body. Riley looked different with him. Not just in how she dressed or smiled, but in how light she seemed. Effortless. The kind of version of herself I hadn't seen in months. Then her eyes met mine. I don't know how she saw me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe she felt me watching. But our eyes locked through the glass, and for a second, the world went quiet. She didn't flinch. Didn't pull her hand back. She just stared, eyes wide, face pale, like she was remembering she had a second life she'd left unattended. I drove away before she could react. I didn't know where to go, so I drove nowhere. Just looped around streets I didn't recognize, trying to outrun the sound of my own thoughts. My hands shook on the wheel. I kept seeing the look on her face, over and over. Not fear. Not regret. Recognition. She knew the moment had come. When I got home, I didn't move for a while. Just sat on the couch, lights off, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own pulse echoing in my ears. I kept waiting for the door to open, for her to come back with some story already rehearsed. But she didn't come home that night. She didn't call, didn't text. The next morning, I woke to find her suitcase in the hall. I hadn't heard her come in. Maybe she'd slipped in after I'd finally passed out. I stared at the suitcase for a long time before I noticed the bookshelf. Half her books were gone. Just gone. Her side of the closet was thinner too. A few dresses missing, a pair of boots she always wore in autumn. Her favorite mug wasn't in the cabinet. The bathroom drawer where she kept her makeup was half empty. It wasn't everything. Just enough to feel like a warning *T. There was a note on the kitchen table. No envelope. No, dear Joe. Just a square piece of paper with a single sentence. I need space. Please don't contact me right now. Riley. Not I'm sorry. Not I'll explain. Just space. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. The numbness was louder than grief. It was the kind of pain that didn't sting, it sat inside your bones, quiet and still. I made coffee out of muscle memory. Stared at the mug in my hand and realized it wasn't mine. It was hers. The one she didn't take. A parting oversight or a message. I couldn't tell anymore. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. I thought it might be her. I wanted it to be her, if only so I could finally ask why. But it wasn't a text. It was a video. No context. No caption. Just a file. I hesitated before opening it, thumb hovering over the screen. And then I tapped play. It was shaky footage, *T from the passenger seat of a car. The dashboard bobbing in and out of frame. The radio playing some soft indie song. And there they were. Riley in the passenger seat. Benjamin driving. They were laughing. She reached over and touched his arm. Turned toward him with a smile I hadn't seen in a year. Sunlight danced through the windshield, casting golden streaks across her face. I paused it halfway through. Couldn't watch more. The video wasn't cruel. It wasn't explicit. But it was final. She had already moved on. And she wasn't looking back. There was no confrontation. No screaming match. No second chances. Riley was the kind of person who didn't burn bridges. She disappeared before the fire could start. I thought the worst part would be the betrayal. But it wasn't. It was the fact that she had planned it. That she had stepped so far outside our life together and built a new one behind closed doors. Carefully. Quietly. Without giving me even a sliver of a chance to fight for us. I wasn't grieving a break. I was grieving a replacement. That night, I boxed up the last few things she hadn't taken. A few books. A scarf she'd left in the coat closet. Her name was still on the mailbox, and I didn't have the strength to peel it off. Not yet. I lay in bed alone and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because the version of me who believed in her hadn't caught up to the truth yet. The garage had always been a place I avoided unless I had to be in it. Cold, dim, a little too cluttered with the ghosts of past projects. Boxes of mismatched tools, half-finished woodwork, old storage bins from our move 3 years ago. Most of it untouched. Riley used to joke that the garage was the one place I could be messy without consequence. It was our unspoken boundary. She didn't clean it, and I didn't pretend I ever would. That Sunday, with nowhere else to be and too much time to think, I opened the door and stepped inside. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe distraction. Maybe just motion to keep my hands from shaking. But something pulled me toward the far corner, behind the shelves where we kept old folders and office junk we never really unpacked. There was a black storage bin pushed low against the wall, nearly hidden beneath an old comforter. I didn't remember seeing it before. Or maybe I had, back when Riley and I first moved in and our whole life was still boxed up and waiting to be settled. The lid was stiff from dust and neglect. When I pried it open, the smell of old paper and fabric softener hit me, like forgotten time. Inside, there were work files, receipts, a cracked keyboard, then near the bottom something else. A sealed black envelope. It stood out immediately. Matte paper. No label. No return address. Thick enough to hold more than just one sheet. My name wasn't on it, but it didn't feel like it had been meant for me to find. Which, of course, only made me open it faster. Inside were letters. Handwritten. Some on thick stationery, others on torn notebook pages. I pulled them out, fingers suddenly unsteady. The first one was dated from 2 months before our wedding. June 4th, 2018. You looked so beautiful today I couldn't breathe. I don't care how many times we try to stay away from each other. We always find a way back. I know you're scared. So am I. But this you and me. It's the only thing that's ever felt honest. The signature at the bottom was a single name. Benjamin. I stared at the page for a long time. Not breathing. Not blinking. Just frozen, as if staying still would keep the words from being real. Benjamin. The name from the message. From the cafe. From the damn video. I opened the next letter. August 21st, 2018. We said we'd stop this after your engagement party. But I saw the way you looked at me that night when he gave you the ring. You looked like someone else. You looked like you were drowning in a decision you couldn't reverse. I don't blame you for choosing safety. But don't lie and say you've chosen love. My stomach turned. I could feel my pulse in my ears, every beat louder than the last. I dropped the letters onto the workbench and stepped back, suddenly unsure if I was going to be sick. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't something that began after we got married, or when the argument started, or when work got busy. This had been going on before the wedding, before our vows, before the house and the job and the plans. She brought him into our story from the beginning. I went back to the box and found more letters, neatly folded, carefully preserved. Some were intense, poetic even. Others were bitter, desperate, filled with longing and frustration. He talked about hotels, missed trains, airports. He mentioned lies she had told me, dates, events, fake friends she had invented to cover their time together. There were receipts too. Printed itineraries from airline confirmations. Toronto. Chicago. New York. One of them was dated for the exact weekend she'd told me she was at a marketing retreat in Napa. I found a letter from just a few weeks ago. April 3rd, 2025. 3 more nights and then it's real. It's terrifying and beautiful. I keep imagining the moment when you finally say goodbye to your old life. You've earned this. You've earned freedom. I'll be waiting. I always have been. There was no date on when she planned to leave, but reading that felt like time folded in on itself. 3 more nights? That would have been the Thursday before the cafe. The day she left her passport on the table. The day she kissed me like it didn't mean anything. I sank onto an overturned crate, the paper still clenched in my hand, the edges softening in my grip. I wasn't the collateral damage of some late-game crisis. I wasn't the victim of an emotional accident. I had been living with someone who had never fully been mine. There were signs, in retrospect. Riley was always guarded about her past. I just chalked it up to being private. I thought she loved the idea of us because we were stable, dependable. But what if I was never her choice, just her fallback? A part of me wanted to burn the letters, to reduce them to ash and pretend they never existed. But I didn't. I read every single one. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. And it went deeper than I thought possible. She wrote back to him. I found only 2 of her letters in the bin, copies, I guess, or drafts she never sent. But they were enough. Riley's letter, September 2022. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd run the day you asked me to. But I didn't. I played the role. I smiled for the pictures. I kissed him and said yes and told myself it was just another kind of love. But it's not. It's not love when you go to bed every night hoping your real life will knock on the door and take you away. You are my real life. I just don't know how to reach it without destroying everything else. I wanted to scream. Or cry. Or just evaporate. But I didn't do any of those things. I just sat there, staring at the edges of her words until my eyes stopped focusing. I had spent years building a life with someone who already had an escape route mapped out. We made decisions together. We bought furniture, debated paint swatches, talked about names for a dog. But in the back of her mind, she was holding on to him. She was making space for someone else even as she promised a future to me. She told me once she didn't believe in big betrayals, only tiny avoidances. I remember laughing, thinking she was talking about texting habits or passive-aggressive housework. Now I realize she was defining the philosophy of her entire double life. It wasn't one big choice. It was thousands of little ones. The missed calls. The secrets. The deflections. The times she said she was just tired. The emotional hesitations I'd mistaken for stress. It all fit now. And for the first time I saw our marriage clearly. Not as a partnership or a shared dream, but as a placeholder. A waiting room for someone else's return. I put the letters back in the envelope and sealed it shut again. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I didn't want to lose myself in them any more than I already had. That night, I placed the envelope in the drawer beside my bed. Not hidden. Not displayed. Just there. A quiet monument to the truth. The first time I opened Riley's laptop, it was by accident. I was cleaning the dining table, clearing clutter like I always did on Saturdays, one of those mindless tasks that used to bring me peace. Her MacBook was half open, screen dimmed but not closed. I tapped the spacebar to move it out of the way and a browser window came up. It was paused mid-email. The sender field said info@carverlawpartners.com. At first, I thought it was spam. Some cold call from a firm. But then I saw her name, Riley Thompson, in the reply chain. My stomach dropped. It was a thread of correspondence that stretched back months. Not weeks. Months. Subject line, separation planning, discretion advised. That was the phrase that told me everything I needed to know. I knew I shouldn't read further. Not because it was private, but because I already felt like I was standing on cracked ice. Still, I clicked. I scrolled. I read. Riley had been in communication with the law firm since February. The emails weren't emotional. They weren't desperate or conflicted. They were structured. Strategic. Bullet points, timelines, financial breakdowns. She wrote in a tone I didn't recognize, no warmth, no hesitation. It was the way people talk when they're managing a transaction. In one message, she asked for advice on quiet asset separation. In another, she requested sample phrasing for a mutual narrative in the event of dissolution. They replied with a PDF, a guide, step-by-step instructions for untangling a marriage without a scene. There were drafts of emails to HR asking about relocation benefits. One mentioned her intention to work remotely post-transition. Another referred to a new apartment lease she was finalizing in confidence. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was premeditation. She had a schedule, a calendar of her exit, complete with financial checkpoints. One of the entries read, Target bonus, June 30th. Right beside it, official filing, early July. She was waiting until she got paid. Waiting until she could walk away comfortably. I clicked through more tabs. She had bookmarked apartments in Boston. Condos with rooftop patios and city views. She'd filled out forms for a moving service and saved Yelp reviews for local dog-friendly neighborhoods. The more I clicked, the more the image sharpened. Riley had not only prepared to leave me, she had arranged every detail of the fallout. She didn't plan to fight. She planned to evaporate. There were even notes from her conversations with a financial advisor. In one file, she listed shared accounts with annotations next to them. Joint checking frozen upon filing. Car, title transfer to Riley before June 25th. Storage unit keys secured. For 01k, QDRO guidance pending. Every item had a deadline. I was a variable in her spreadsheet. I backed out of the browser and sat there for a long time. The cursor blinked on the email draft she had started that morning. It was addressed to a real estate agent in Cambridge. Subject: regarding the lease start date. She hadn't even filed yet. Hadn't said a word. But in every way that mattered, she had already left. I closed the laptop slowly, like I might set off a tripwire. My reflection hovered in the screen. Tired eyes, unshaven. A man who'd been narrating his own downfall in real time without realizing it was a script someone else had written. That evening, I checked the safe in our bedroom. Inside were the passports, the birth certificates, her grandmother's jewelry, and, new to me, a sealed manila envelope with her handwriting on the corner. For attorney review, confidential. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. She had everything arranged. Documents pre-signed. Budgets calculated. A soft landing already waiting. What shocked me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the precision. She wasn't fleeing a broken marriage. She was executing an exit strategy. I walked out to the porch, sat in the chair she used to drink tea from in the mornings, and stared out at nothing. I thought of our last anniversary. She had forgotten it at first. Claimed she thought it was the next weekend. I took her out anyway, tried to make it matter. She picked at her food the entire night and scrolled through her phone when I stepped away to use the restroom. Now I realized she wasn't detached that night because she was tired or distracted. She was already gone. This wasn't a woman who was unsure. This was someone who knew exactly how much time she needed to detach from a shared life and convert it back into hers. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake trying to remember every conversation we'd had over the past year. Every time she said, "It's just work stress," or "I just need space," or "You're overthinking it," every single phrase suddenly echoed with double meaning. I wasn't a failing husband. I was a solved equation. The next morning, I moved every account I could into individual access. Froze the credit cards. Called my bank. I didn't tell them why. I just told them I wanted a review. They didn't ask questions. I went through my own email and searched for her name. Found dozens of receipts she'd forwarded to me for shared purchases. Luggage, hotel stays, work dinners. I started pulling them into a folder. It wasn't for revenge. It was to remind myself that this happened. That I wasn't imagining it. That it wasn't a dream I could wake up from. By noon, I was on the phone with an attorney. He asked how I wanted to proceed. Calmly, I said, but with clarity. I wasn't going to beg Riley to stay. I wasn't going to guilt her or accuse her or ask her to explain. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about control. She took it from me while I was still trying to hold our marriage together. Now I was taking it back. My lawyer told me that having evidence of premeditated financial action mattered. That if we could prove calculated intent behind her decisions, it could influence how the separation was handled. I nodded. But that wasn't why I was collecting it. I didn't want to ruin her. I just wanted the record. The unvarnished truth of who she became when I wasn't looking. That night, I opened her laptop again. One more time. I found a folder on the desktop labeled Wellness and Planning. Inside, a series of documents titled, What I Want from Life. How to Let Go Without Guilt. Exit Affirmations Personal Copy. I opened the last one. It was a list of mantras. Things she had written for herself. Reminders. Leaving doesn't make me cruel. Freedom is not betrayal. I'm allowed to choose myself. I'm not abandoning him, I'm saving me. They were typed in bold font. Centered. With a quote at the bottom from some self-help author. The truth isn't what you owe others, it's what you owe yourself. I read them all. And then I deleted the folder. Not out of spite. Out of mercy. Because if she truly believed those things, then she was already too far gone for apologies to matter.